All right, episode number two, David the Indian, live from Brazil at a remote island location. David, welcome back. How you doing?
Great, Sean. Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone listening in the audience. Hopefully, we're going to get return and repeat customers in the sense that we're satisfying the desire and the craving that we all have for truth, information, science, math, and all of the things that are exact and kind of end all of the bullshit if we can and smoke and mirrors and really come to the truths and realities of what we're talking about. So thanks, Sean. Thanks again. And so we were going back and forth. Actually, yesterday's show, we were talking, as you just mentioned this morning, Sean, about crystals, crystal technology, and how that all plays into a lot, actually everything, you know. And so I don't know if you want to go ahead and I know a couple of days ago, actually, when we first met, you showed me your collection of all sorts of crystals, and many of them actually come from
Oh,
Brazil,
hmm.
actually very close to where I'm located in Belo Horizonte, which is Minas Gerais, is a state just north of São Paulo. And it's interesting about Belo because it is a place where these crystal formations and caves just naturally exist. The minerals of not only crystals, but gold, diamond, everything. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
But other than the crystal, actually, there's a couple of things interesting about crystals I want to mention. In Belo Horizonte, I've already introduced you to Dr. Paulo Farrier, who is a neuroscientist. He's actually a psychiatrist, psychologist, but he deals actually with now he's dealing in these electromagnetic hailing modalities, and so he's very big on the in the world of quantum and doing many different things. But that's a connection with the crystals. Also, there's a project, interestingly, that I'm working with somebody that was very close with Osho, the guru from India. You remember Osho? And back in the United States in the I think it was 1970s or 80s, this guru from India went into Oregon, into a city. Do you remember the story about the city, the Osho city, where
Mm-mm.
it was all like it was supposed to be like a new world city, like we even talk about today, about having sovereign place where you have equality and you have bartering system, alternative ways, so that people really don't have a job, uh, in the sense of reporting to a physical location. So back in the day, this was very kind of futuristic idea, and also it was back around Woodstock and the hippies and the introduction of many different drugs, that like LSD and angel dust and these kind of methamphetamines and things. So, and it was the kind of an experimental phase for all of our humanity to understand how these big cities were just getting bigger and bigger, and pollution was getting worse. And anyways, Osho went to Oregon. He was very very famous. I mean, I don't know, not as famous as like Buddha or Jesus Christ, but at the time he was very famous. But what happened in history is his life kind of fell apart, and a lot of it has to do with this city that he was building in Oregon. What happened is he basically opened up invitation for homeless people and all sorts of walks of life to go into this area in Oregon. And some of the local residents, not all of them, just basically labeled this as some type of cult or whatever. So even though Osho came into the United States with great intentions, what they did is they bared arms against the city, and he was actually successful in growing the city like incredibly fast. But people refer to Osho as tantra and tantric energy, which most people think of it as a sexual thing, but really it's tantra is about holding your space. So what that means is, like, we've already getting back to a couple of other episodes and conversations about point zero zero absolute. This is a specific place. It's the same for us all. But in order, first thing, we have to get there all together, and then we have to hold that space together. And that is that is really the real I guess challenge, because getting there, like for me, for example, I think I go in and out of there. I'm not like limited. I'm flowing, but to be there alone doesn't do anything.
Mhm.
You know, so what? You're perfectly healthy and perfectly happy, but that's not the truth, because if anyone in on Earth or in conscious intelligence is suffering, that means we all are suffering, because that means that we didn't maximize the equation, that we do have an error. And in quantum physics and these healing modalities that you talk a lot about, the reality is there's no more error. And that's why we can say these things are mathematically proven, at least theoretically. And then what we talked about yesterday was about the belief system. So we can have the science and math behind it, but if you don't believe it, it still doesn't work. you
Mhm.
know so you can design the machine, engineer it, and what have you. It could be the greatest thing, but for some people it may not work. They don't want it to work. That's the reality deep down inside. And this is one of the questions that we went over yesterday, some basic questions that we ask people. I ask people when I first meet them, do you want to live? And like I said yesterday, most people say right away yes. And then I say, do you want to live forever? And then, like I said yesterday, they said, hell no. Why would I want to live here in this world and suffer and witness? I want to get as not as quick as I can. They don't really want to kill themselves, because that's really very courageous. Quite honestly, I don't know. Like I said also yesterday, we study the area in scientific studies of thanatology, which is the actual study of dying and the dying process. So the mental idea of even killing yourself is pretty complex, and it's deeply woven into past lives and trauma and pain bodies and actual physical accidents too, which is something that maybe at some point we can talk a little bit about. Dr. Johan Boswinkel out of the Netherlands and his technology called the Cheren. Do you know the Cheren? Chiren.
Do not.
Karen is another device that would be interesting for you to add to your kind of arsenal there with all of the other stuff that you have. But the Charon uses a biophotonic technology. I know that you've spoken about this type of topic, which is biophotonic light, which is really pure light from the original source at zero point zero 0.00 absolute. When people go through the darkness, you come to this light, and that is the pure biophotonic light of creation. That is what it actually germinates the original seed of life. Call it Big Bang or whatever, but it's this soft, white, glowing light that actually Johann Boswinkel has been able to identify and scientifically prove that it exists. And what happens is when we pulse, basically remind the body of the natural kind of harmony and balance that these cells have, and the telomeres and everything along with it, the whole body condition. Once it's engulfed with this biophotonic light, it's soft light, so you can have your eyes open. It's not like welding or something like that, or looking at the sun or some exposure, because the biophotonic light has no light band discrepancy. So you don't see like shades, not shades, but tones of colors like red and orange and the colors of the chakras, for example. You don't see that in the aura. You don't see an aura. What you do see is that orb. Like when people witness like ET and stuff, they say, I saw a light. It's like a circular light. And that actually is a living being. And any life has that illumination. And so the astral body, or call it whatever you want, it's kind of a cool topic. So here we go again. I'm rambling on, and you're so patient there.
I love it,
So
man. It's like I'm learning so much, and I feel like there is something to be said for that creative flow of information as well, I think the world has enough structure. We don't need to have overbearing amount of it here when we're kind of going off and you know, putting out this type of information.
Yeah, that's, one of the things I wanted to kind of give you some feedback. Yesterday, you were talking about Dan Winter and his expertise, and I didn't know Dan up until last night. After we got off, I watched like a 2 hour podcast that he did, and man, you know, Dan and I are we're one anyways. We all are. So at point zero zero, absolutely, we absolutely are identical. Okay, but his expression and the way that I'm expressing myself and you and everyone for that matter is a unique tone or musical like song. So when he talks about some of the, I mean, you even mentioned the double pine cone kissing noses and things like that, right? You
I've
probably
got his
took,
technology.
yeah, yeah. It's just he really elaborates more scientifically with these terms in these actual ways of describing things, and that's a little bit different from what I'm doing. So there's no conflict or anything with any of these anybody. I don't have a conflict with anybody because I come to that point zero zero absolute, and then I work from there. I deal with some other doctors, quite honestly, and I disclose a lot of stuff, and most of the time they never call me back because probably they think I'm competing with them or it's a great idea. They're just going to go to the lab and try to make it work. You know, if a cook, like I told you, I'm a chef, so I take food and I put it together. If I can do that with this this soup of quantum that we're working with, anybody can, and that's the beauty of it. But when we try to explain these complex situations, even though we're not trying, like me, I'm not trying to profit individually, I'm not asking anybody to hold any secrets or whatever. The more that people actually copy and the more that people kind of mimic and use their own creativity and spins, the better for me. So that's the whole idea, is to come out with this openness on the island here. As you mentioned, here I am off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is High Brazil Island, which is based on a Irish myth. I don't know if I mentioned this. This High Brazil is actually an island that was mythologically spoken about 700-800 years, who knows, long time ago in Ireland. And it was actually classified as a floating island because historically you could see nautical maps of this island off the west coast of Ireland, which is going towards the direction of Brazil, right? And so they have these multiple maps where historians and people that do that type of research have basically done like overlays. And over history, the island was not in one geographic position. Whether the earth was still forming and moving or not, this is a different story. But ultimately, what happened is the island went in and disappeared. And so there's a gap in history. There's a, like Atlantis, Lemuria, or these other places that we talk about. This island actually had a GPS location. So what we're saying is that Brazil, the name Brazil comes from this myth, High Brazil Island, because the Irish spoke about this place of beauty and this place of abundance. And everyone that lives on this island is so happy and in harmony. There's no conflict. That doesn't mean that death doesn't exist and whatever in trials and tribulations, but it's a place of, you know, of peace and home. That's who, or soul. So High Brazil kind of dovetails in with Null Island. Here's another island. That's why, my podcast that I do, The Power of Islands, what I focus on is how do these islands have an impact in that electric grid, like portals. Many of these islands are pyramids that have just accumulated the soil above them. But if you tear them away, whether or not they're structurally a pyramid or not, these are centers of energy transfer. We talk about that in other shows. Even these churches and other monuments around the world have these antennas on their roofs. Most of them have been grounded or have been removed or somehow stopped. And so this is where, when we start talking about modern religion and such, some people would say that's a deliberate act to get us so that we can't talk to each other anymore, and that we're not tapping into this natural source of power and healing and things like that. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But our efforts here on this island, High Brazil, off the coast of Sao Paulo, is to have a quantum physics research station in a hub, what we call a failing tank, not a think tank. We have a lot of think tanks around the world, but I have never been in a failing tank. So after we go through critical thinking, then we can let that energy go into our heart. If it resonates in our throat chakra and then it comes out of our mouths, now we're acting out, our character, our passions in the conscious awareness of who we are as far as intelligence and how we're going to express that. And we all do that uniquely differently, which is great. That's what makes it entertaining. If everyone's talking about the same thing at the same time, it's that's whitewashing, brainwashing, or call it communism or some isnism to just keep you just not natural. So, anyways, Sean, I know I'm going on again, and you don't have your Dunkin' Donuts today, do you?
No,
Or do
dude, I
you?
decided I can't be sponsoring them. They have to become a paid sponsor. So I'm back to Dunder Mifflin, baby. My Dunder Mifflin, like you just bring up the word The Office and Steve Carell or anything, and I'm already laughing before I've even set my coffee cup down. And it puts me in such a good mood because I'm immediately in the modality of The Office. That is my living reality. That office and my office are synergistic, and all we're doing is having fun and going completely off the deep end, and and basically creating our own reality of humor, fun, and helping the world be a better place. So humor and laughter and off the top type stuff is what makes life so fun and enjoyable. And our office, you will be here some point. You'll find that it's nonstop. That's all we're doing all day long is making each other laugh, joking about stuff, and trying to, through the good and the bad. It's like, hey, I just, this just the thing just went off a cliff. Well, hey, you know what? Let's get down below. We'll gather some stuff up and let's try it again. I mean, it's that's just the nature of life. But it's not. Until you can process out seriousness, you're always going to have issues, right? Like the soul naturally is blissful, right? And bliss is the natural state of our reality. And the minute that you've lost that, and the minute that the third dimensional stuff has come in to make you quote unquote serious, that's when there's glue that needs to be taken out, and we need to like reestablish some parameters, realities, and I mean, generally speaking, that's not saying that there aren't a few issues here and there, but generally speaking, you know, you got to be able to laugh through it. It's a dear friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, always said that it's very much like going down a river. Sometimes you're going to hit times where you're in a nice pool and it's calm. Sometimes you're going to hit the rapids. And sometimes you're going to go over the falls, and you do not want to be the guy that's trying to avoid going over the falls, that's freaking out, is trying to paddle, and it's never going to work. There comes a point where you have to just go, here we go, and you just release it, and
Right.
you go over the falls, and you come be it what may be, but it's kind of going down the river of life.
Yeah, actually, it's that's a tie-in directly with Niagara Falls. Have you been up there? Have you seen the falls? Yeah. And the stories about the people that have gone off of that thing in barrels and stuff. And we're talking about like, wine barrels. We're not talking about like time capsules from Elon Musk or something.
Like an Oktoberfest party that went bad.
Yeah. Yeah. We have been talking about this point zero zero absolute. It's something that I try to drive home like as much as I can without being forceful on people, because it's not really me trying to turn people to kind of transform people. People have to do that themselves. But you were talking about some of the complications in our lives, and really, quite honestly, what at point zero zero absolute, it's unconditional everything, but specifically love. So at that point, there are no complications. You do not have any complications whatsoever by definition. See, you were mentioning that there's certain things that are happening outside of us in our environment that are pulling us and distracting us and confusing us. And see, when people, I don't know if you yourself have been actually the point zero zero absolute. You may subconsciously have been there and not realized it, but now we have the roadmap, and we talked about the compass that you already have. So you go in and out of there as whenever you want. We already talked about the Akashic Library of Records being there and everything, any creation, like anything, not just creation, anything, but create the reality is we are creating, we are creators. So we are in continuation of human evolution. Hopefully, we prevent any extinct behaviors like where there's being controversies that we're this is like a doomsday situation and all of that. Hopefully, we can help add some comfort to people that it's not that way. It could be that way. I mean, anything is possible. We can do whatever. And
Well,
so, but at that point, yeah, go
yeah,
at that
well,
point
so
zero.
David, I'm really glad because I really feel like I know for me personally, this is all new to me. So, hitting point zero zero absolute, when you have a knowledge base of what that is, what you're trying to achieve, where that's at, what that means, I don't feel like something that profound can be spoken about one time for you to embrace it and understand it. I feel like with everything and anything I do, it's ongoing. I might listen to that for the next 3 or 4 years of my life because there's a moment of hearing it and trying to wrap your head around it. But even once that's done, becoming it, living it, and embracing that into your living reality is a process. So initially, the first part of it is hearing it and plotting it and starting to bounce it around. But I feel like for anybody that missed, we had 2 calls before we started filming, and we did our first episode yesterday, which will be up shortly. And this episode, I might even be able to get this up today as well. But I think if you don't mind, for the sake of myself and the viewing audience, can we go back and talk about point zero zero absolute? Talk about kind of what that means and what that reality is, and then talk about how you get there, and then maybe transition into the Akashic and things that you can tap into with reaching that point or that state of
Well,
consciousness.
yeah, I mean, actually, that's advisable that we do start there because that is the starting point of everything. And when we are acting as teachers, mentors, shamans, healers, or whatever, whoever we're working with, first of all, they have to accept that they want help. I mean, as a shaman or anybody, even a teacher, you are always asked, would you like my help? Would you like to live forever? Is what I say. And the thing is, a lot of people do not want to live forever. This technology is a very interesting longevity and some of the kind of temptations that people have to kind of buy into that. But that's a different relationship because really what we're trying to do is not separate anybody. We're trying to come into unity and singularity. And that is what point zero zero absolute is. It is the beginning and the end, and it's not linear. We might say it's down because we think that a higher number than zero is above, or even God in the heavens are above us, like upward. But as you know, as we all know, it's that reverse spin. It's the spin, the reverse spin, and the different angles that spin takes, that takes on that geometric, the biogeometric ability to transfer the energy. And in the energy is the data, and in the data is the information, your emotion, your mental outlook and perception and attitudes and habits and all of the personality and character and things like that are all built into that. So, you know, it's so critical to come to that realization that we are one. And so this is something that one of the other simple questions, Sean, that I ask people normally when I meet them, whether it be online or what have you. I ask people very simple question: are we one? And then I I highlight that. Are we one is the question. And I say yes equals one, and any other word or hesitation means no. So there's nothing wrong. So that's what I say. Yes or no. Yes is one. Any other word or hesitation is no. And then I ask again, yes or no. And when people respond, if it's not an immediate like confirming yes, and I'm not talking about like the Catholic Church confirmation of through baptism and stuff like that. I'm talking about just a
I was
simple
brought up the same way, just so you know. I was brought up the same way, but we can move on. Remember, you were telling me about. I was brought up Catholic also, so I have a lot of funny jokes and things that I can share. But I don't want to take you off. You're on a good roll right now.
yeah. I mean, oh,
So
that's the thing. Go ahead. Maybe you want to ask a question to guide a little bit here.
yeah,
Go ahead.
so okay, so we understand that that's where we need to be or where we want to be is point zero zero absolute. What is the process of entering into that consciousness?
The process, Sean, is very simple because there's two sides to every coin. I think we all agree with that. There's polarity, there's the inversion of anything, there's the mirror image, whatever. The reflection comes from point zero zero absolute. So that's the reflective body. So that 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 in itself, the point zero zero absolute happens naturally because we're in the fourth dimension and we're on the gravitational force side of the equation. The inverse or opposite of gravitational force would be the other side, which is power, levitation, and anti-gravity or vacuum discrepancy. So that the what's called the line of delineation between the force, which is the gravitational push. It's not really a pull. We are being pushed down. And think of it this way: we're in the fourth dimension, and nature is trying to really ground us. That's why we talk about like grounding and stuff. That's why it's so natural. And even like high tide and low tide, like the sea level, is so important atmospherically. It's so healthy to be right at the high and low mark and move with that. And there's actually an energy field, a hydrogen energy web, it's called, that's created just above the water. And and there's a circulative current so that we can actually fly like low flying drones within this current that's like almost like the airstream for planes when they're saving on fuel to get into these streams. But the fact is, when we have the ocean, it's all a stream, and so it creates multiple layers of functionality of so how we can actually tap into that 0.00 absolute is to really allow ourselves to just cascade naturally from fourth dimension to the third to the second to the first and finally resting in zero. But the final resting point is not just getting to zero dimensions, it's going to the center of zero. That's what makes this the absolute foolproof. The theory of nothing is what I call it. And so I believe it was Einstein called the theory of everything, or Stephen Hawkins, I think, one of them. So we've been developing this concept of the theory of everything, and we've actually been looking to be number one. We want one. We don't want zero. And so the human tendency is to reject anything about zero just because of our program. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like the right way to go because we've been programmed, all of us, to ultimately look to the heavens, strive for the ascension. For our, even if you're not spiritual or religious, everyone would kind of point to the sky and say that's where God is. That's where our spirit ascends to. But and to also vibrate high is how you get there. So look to the sun, look to the light, go to the light, vibrate high. That's the message. That's kind of the general message when you boil it all down in our society. But thousands of years, millions of years ago, it wasn't that way. It was about about look look in the earth, look within yourself, go into the ground, go into the darkness, face those dark moments. The light is actually in the center of the darkness. So really the truth about the power of our humanness and our ability consciously to do this, because I don't know any other creature that can actually talk like we're talking about right now. I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking about really the fabrics of what life is and where the origins are, and indirectly who we are as people, why we are in each of our positions, and all the questions of life begin to vanish, because at point zero zero absolute, there's no more questions. There's no more anything. But when we contemplate that there's these other kind of societal things that we need to deal with, that's when we begin to take a step off of point zero zero absolute. And we're not talking about a long distance. We don't even know what that distance is. Really, it's the synapse, the neurological transfer of just the idea that you're going to leave home. I mean, you have to make that decision, because once you're at point zero zero absolute, it's actually challenging to go back into the fourth dimension. If you have everything, why do you want to come back? The fact is, we have not the fact. Let me the current science and everything. We have a limited time here. That's why people say I don't have enough time. I want to do so much. I have a bucket list and all this, other stuff. We believe, and we were told another fallacy, that when we were born, then we get older, then we get sicker, and then we die. So I don't know anybody that's real happy with that kind of outlook. And I don't care if you're, rich or poor or whatever. I mean, we all fall within that same human development cycle. And so it's very depressing to think that way. That's why point zero zero absolute is an option. Maybe not right away for everybody. Like you said, sometimes these things do take a period of time to go through, depending on where you are on that, the reality, which reality and timeline you're on, and things like that. For us to really merge and assimilate and come together in unity, it does. All it does is require is a desire. Like I said, that's what people. But when you ask people, "Are we one?" and they say anything other than yes, that's where the education needs to come in, because quite honestly, all of the equipment that you're working with there is a 0 and 1 algorithm that operates those pulses and vibrations and light and everything. So it needs to be in balance, 0 or 1. So when I ask the question, are we one? If you say no right away or you say yes, for me, it's equal. It doesn't, you can say no, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying everyone's going to answer that question yes, but what is not a bad thing, but it's a challenge, is when people are wishy-washy and they're in the center, and they're
Mm.
not the center of point zero, they're in the center of that yes or no. They're confused. They're you know what I'm saying? They're chasing their tail. They're misguided. Many people are angry because they've been lied to, and they've been physically abused and went through all sorts of genocide and the World War and the Holocaust and the Jews and oh my God, what the fuck? If we go in that fog of life, and I'm not saying that we don't understand all of that, but geez, it's difficult, Sean, because people, like I said, most people do not want to live. They won't admit it until the last freaking moment. They'll actually, and also we are so driven by our ego that the number one thing the ego says is it can wait until tomorrow. Let's do another show. Let's have another meeting. Let's go on and on until eternity. The ego loves that confusion, and that's why we have like politicians and characters in our society that are egomaniacs. They're narcissists. They're sex abusers. There's all sorts of crazy personality manipulations. They're not authentic. That's the whole point. If at point zero zero absolute, there's nothing, you don't exist. But when you come off of that point, be proud and bring it with you. That's who you are. And there's nobody like you. So, but the recommendation is don't go far. Go as we can all adventure. We all make mistakes, and we like to kind of play around, even with our parents and stuff. Kind of push the envelope with our friends and whatever. Really, just to get a feeling of whether or not we're on or off point zero zero. Absolute. That's quite honest. It's like a game. Once you come off of point zero zero absolute, that's when the game begins. And you can design your own game. That's the beauty of this. But it is a game. It's not natural. Outside of point zero zero absolute is not natural. That is where the matrix that we live in, society, is outside of that. That doesn't mean that we don't coexist in community. There's going to be some people that catch this message right away, like early adopters, and it makes sense. And it's the last piece of the puzzle. So, like I said, even yesterday, there's some doctors that I'm working with that have great inventions, like super. That all of this stuff is going to start coming out, but the fact is that they're not optimized because they don't have that last piece. So we don't have to work with these people or anybody for that matter to get the 99% to finish the 1% is only one piece. That's all we have to focus on. And now we have these methods of communication, like this podcast, for example, that you're doing, that we're trying to co-produce and bring other podcasts. So it's a whole platform 24/7,
Hmm.
live, real time, what's going on, experts all over the world, no script, no calendar adjustments, no editing, no nothing. It's just like let's talk about this stuff, let's get it out, let's evolve, let's transition this technology that we know that we have. Let's finish the final piece on each one of those equipment and come in. And the final piece, by the way, is point zero zero absolute. So it's not like we have to analyze all of them. All we have to do is come to that point zero zero absolute with all of those devices. That's the thread that we weave. And so now we weave the fabric of what our society and our reality and creating these like let me ask you a question. For example, I've been talking this morning with a gentleman involved with the Venus Project there in Florida. Do you know the Venus Project in Jock Fresco?
You're not.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to get into it all on this show, but it would justify having this person. His name is Harakat, and he's involved with India, a project in India that I'm working on with a group of Professor Goswami, who's not Amit Goswami, because some people might know in the world of quantum the name Amit Goswami. Do you know Amit?
You're
Amit
not.
Goswami? Okay. Anyways, this Indian group is proposing a national program to create these community gardens. It's a localized effort to start to rehabilitate the soil and actually look at water quality, and also, supplying food that's not contaminated in GMO and all of this. And so they have about 1,000 or so different sites that they've already allocated to go ahead and implement this model called global and local. It's global. Think globally and act locally. These are these slogans that other people are using and picking up right now. But that's really the God's honest truth. We do live in a global environment. We are one intelligence. Our cultural aspects where we live, like here in Brazil versus there in Virginia with you, Sean, obviously are different, and that's what makes it so beautiful, and that's why it's so wonderful to travel and meet different people and what have you. So
Mhm.
let me ask you, the relationships that you have in India, there anything currently that you're working in India with the hospitals and other outreach that
I
you
don't,
do?
yeah, I don't have any projects right now in India. I think the main focus of everything I'm doing right now is Africa. I mean, aside from me traveling in India and being in India and spending 30 years, or more, almost 40 years now studying and being a part of Vedic culture and being very well versed in it. And being very lucky to have spent time with sadhus and yogis and um, and just being part of the culture. And there's just such a the Vedic stuff to me is just you know it's like an ocean that you could swan dive into, and you probably never hit the bottom. But that's the beauty of it, because there is a point where we say that you have to turn off the calculator, right? You have to stop trying to think you need to figure everything out, because just like your ears have a limited range of vocals, and just like your eyes have a limited range of spectrums of light, your brain is only able to do so much. And when we start getting into some really, really high, well, and I don't even like to get into duality, but when we start getting into some really intense subject matter, there is a point where you have to just absorb it and just move into it. You know, you can't keep trying to figure everything out. We call it the calculator. Like, you know, like the brain is trying to be a calculator and rationalize everything, but there comes a point where you have to get rid of the calculator and you have to move into that space. And I've been so blessed because I've been around some, you know, just some very enlightened individuals, and it was at a very early age. And as I get older, I'm understanding and appreciating at a much deeper level what that meant and what that did for me. And you know, like with you, and you know, we had very much the same upbringing with a lot of different things, but looking at the whole and understanding, you know, that we are one, and being able to have these experiences and then weave them together into a fabric of love, compassion, understanding. You know, it's kind of it's part of the journey, and it's what makes it fun. It's what makes this conversation live now, unscripted, so beautiful, because you know, it puts us on these paths and on these journeys where anything and everything is possible. And when you're really a truth seeker, which I don't, there's part of the term I love, but when you are, it comes to you. You don't have to go searching for it. You don't have to, there is no, like, there's no efforting it. You know, my friend always used to say, God distributes himself. He doesn't need you to do it for him. And the minute you think that you're distributing and you're the active, it's like you're the vessel, right? So, like, let's
Yeah.
just reestablish the reality of what's really happening.
Yeah.
But then it
And
goes back to the humor, the love. So,
well, it always goes back there. Like I said, the point zero zero absolute, everything starts there, ends there. And all that is witnessed as far as a human attachment or feeling is that feeling of love. And
mhm,
people, even near death experiences and other phenomenon that we talk about with thanatology, and I mentioned that we teach that all about death and dying. This is a process for us to really become intimate. So it's not the duality; it's the singularity of us being all in
mhm,
everything and all connected and all powerful and omnipresent. And with that comes the responsibility, because now when you come off of point zero zero absolute, you are 100% responsible, because you got home. It's like having kids that want to run away from your house, whatever. They're growing up and they just hate mom and dad. There's too much, control, and they just want freedom. And then when the kids leave the nest and then they come back, that's really the gratifier for me, because I'm even going through an experience right now. I have two sons, 32 and 31, and kind of they pulled for many reasons. I'm not justifying one right or wrong, but that they obviously, as babies, they were in my life, and I was divorced, but I had custody rights and I took care of them every other weekend, and I helped out until they got like puberty and started dating girls. And I realized that it doesn't matter if I had them every other weekend, they were going to ask me to go sleep over someone else's house anyways. So
right?
that's when I gained my freedom. As they got older, that's when I came to Brazil. So I had no intentions. I was happy locally, living locally. I didn't need, I wasn't searching. Like you say, you don't search for truth. It's when it's revealed to you. Now it's so enlightening that all you can do is share it. That's why, to be a disciple of Jesus or God or anything, whatever it is, to be a disciple is to endorse it, live it, breathe it, and die for it if you needed to. I mean, you're going to go right to the last moment. This is the truth, and the truth for you and me are the same. It's not like some people say, oh, we live in different realities. Those are reflective differences or fractal differences. That's not the where the source of energy is coming from. These are reflective things. So if we come to the source, then we don't have any of these desires, like you say, to solve these problems, because we realize it's all illusionary. That problem doesn't exist. If you notice, even people, and this is something that, over time, I started witnessing my own life, because I actually always thought as a child that I was going to be part of the solution, and that I was motivated always to be part of that. I kept telling myself, I'm going to be part of the solution. I'm going to come up with something to help, alleviate some of the pressures and stress and emotional trauma and whatever in my life, which was pretty dynamic and almost never ending. I thought I was never going to get out of that stream, and that, instead of fighting, I did. I sucked it up and I got in the barrel and I just went off of the falls. I mean, I just said, you know what I'm saying?
Here we
I
go.
was tired. I was tired, Sean, just like most people may be listening to this. I was tired of fighting the natural force of gravity, because I was convinced that, my higher self and ethics and morality and kind of lofty kind of concepts were outside of me. But that changed, and that now the perception is, I realized that the point zero zero absolute is inside of me. It's inside of every person, place, and thing, and everything possible and everything impossible. Even that's what makes it omnipresent and absolute. So